Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Sly, president of Proplanner, and I, on behalf of all the experts here at Proplanner, want to wish you a welcome to our company to see some of the great things that our customers are doing with our product, as well as where we're going with the product here in the future. So the schedule we have today, I'm going to just give you a quick overview on what we did in 2020. Some of you were actively involved with some elements of that, and then where we're going in 2021. I also want to use this opportunity to introduce the slate of speakers that we have today. So we're going to start talking about some of our MES process data flow, a little bit about how a company went through the process of identifying why they went with the Proplanner technology. We'll talk with Caresoft on our 3D technologies, which is an area that I'll be speaking about here in a moment, that we spent a lot of time on in 2020, actually also in 2019, and even a little bit in 2018. Caresoft's one of our partners, a very valued partner, and they've really helped us refine our workflows in 3D. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about an excellent example on paint shop line balancing. As we all know, line balancing is a very powerful technology in the Proplanner suite. It's really what we believe is one of our core competencies, although we're obviously expanding that core competency into other areas such as the 3D workflow in manufacturing and the ability to publish and manage in MES and PFEP. So, but line balancing is really where we got our start. It was our recognition that in the assembly plant space, the ability to better manage tasks and assignment of tasks based on different product mixes, different production volumes was something that was really lacking. So ROI, which is also a very valued partner that we have working with one of our customers, has an excellent presentation in that area. We're going to talk about a little bit more on line balancing, some of the new enhancements that we've done. We have one of our developers, industrial engineers, who is working on that particular feature. He's going to show you some of our new capabilities in line balancing that were just added this last year, and a little bit more about where we're going with line balancing. We've made big investments in our shop floor viewer technologies, moving it further and further into the MES space. We've also been adding on our and-on technologies for essentially displaying the status of manufacturing on the shop floor. And so we're going to have a detailed presentation about that technology as it's being deployed right now, as it was in 2020, and where it's going in 2021. We're going to continue on our focus on MES and work instructions through with one of our valued customers who's been with us for a long time. Complex, very low volume, mixed model products, kind of the hallmark of the type of customers that we have here at Proplanner. And they're going to talk about how they're using Proplanner for shop floor instructions and some of the MES functionality. One of our largest customers, Case New Holland, will be talking about some of the things that we're doing with torque tools, which is an initiative we launched last year, a really important focus for us, and something that we are going to be introducing what we did for 2020 and really identifying where we're going with that in 2021. Dan Miner is going to talk from our organization a lot about where we're going with MES enhancements that our clients have requested, both, once again, some of the things that we've added really in 2019 and 2020, but maybe haven't been used by a lot of our clients yet, and then where we're going with those enhancements in 2021. Of course, work instructions and logistics at Proplanner are hand in hand. I can't have a work instruction document that calls out parts if I don't have those parts. And I certainly don't want a synchronization problem where the parts that I have don't match the parts I'm supposed to put on from the work instructions. So we believe pretty strongly that the PFEP, plan for every part type technologies, the line side presentation of materials and kitting, Kanban, are a very important integral part of MES, of the work instructions delivery and execution on the shop floor. So we're going to be talking about what we're doing with PFEP, logistics, and kitting. We've also made some enhancements supporting some new technologies such as Android for delivery of that information to more mobile-oriented devices. And then I'll sync back here at the end of the presentation or conference here to discuss with you what you think about where we're going and giving us feedback on what 2021 and 2022 should look like. I do want to mention, I'm going to mention that here again in a moment, that this conference is for you. I mean, we really want to open this dialogue, not just between us and you, as it probably has been for at least one, and for some of you many years, but also amongst yourselves, really trying to create a bit of a community around the Proplanner technology and all the different ways that it's used. Because one of the things I think that we've learned in the now 19th year of our business is that what Proplanner is the culmination of all of the best practices from all of the companies who use the tool. You've given us feedback. You've told us we need to do this, we want to do this. How about you do that? And we've added that feature and another feature and another feature. When we look at our development list on a given month, we probably modify or add about 40 to 50 things to the product every single month. Some of these things, of course, are small. Some of these things end up stacking up to be something that's very big, such as 3D, where it takes many, many months of 40 things to build a product that's truly usable. So, like I said, this is your conference. We really hope that you use the opportunity to raise your hand, to engage in the chat, to give us feedback, and to engage in this dialogue, this discussion. It's unfortunate that we have to do this via the cloud. Although on the other hand, it could be a mixed blessing because we're able to get a lot of people who could not normally travel. So please use the interactive technologies that we have here with Zoom. Once again, raising your hand or chat to help interact with the speaker, ask questions, and learn how this can apply to your organization. I want to take this opportunity to talk about those 2020 accomplishments that I've kind of alluded to in our schedule. The cloud, MES, and 3D. You know, if there were three things that we have to pick that defines what Proplanner did in 2020, those would be the three things. There is a fourth thing, security, and security is very important. In fact, it's so important, I gave a whole separate slide to that topic. But the cloud, we have really focused on expanding the offering on the Azure platform. By expanding the offering, what I'm really saying is we started with the core assembly planner engineering technologies, and then we've expanded that to include shop floor viewing technologies. We've expanded that to include streaming video and streaming 3D CAD models and viewing CAD models on the cloud. We've expanded that into now PFEP and logistics and doing transactional Kanban and kitting through our cloud interface. We've expanded it by including web service links and connectivity to on-prem based ERP and PLM or PDM type environments where we get our data from and send our data to, recognizing that we may be the technology on the cloud. We've extended it to enabling technologies such as Proceedix for Google Glass, which is also a cloud application, to integrating with some of the cloud tools that we have. That's pretty complicated stuff, and we spent a lot of time in 2020 building that capability. And not only just making it work, but making it work as fast as it needs to work. Of course, performance, bandwidth, these are very important issues, of course, when we get onto the cloud. And security, I'm going to say that several times throughout this presentation. So while we had a cloud deployment coming into 2020, the maturity of the cloud deployment, the performance of the cloud deployment, the security of the cloud deployment, the interconnectivity of the cloud deployment was enhanced substantially. We don't actually have a presentation specifically on what we did for the cloud in this particular conference, so that's why I want to highlight it a little bit. But if you have questions, if the cloud technologies is a way that you're going or you want to go, please work with our engineers to learn more about that. Of course, we're going to continue to support on-prem installations, but what's happening is that the technologies that are available to us, such as video streaming, just for example, is different on the cloud as it is on-prem. In other words, the toolkits that we have to provide tools to you. As many of you know, we're kind of an intermediary. We're much like an automotive OEM in the software space. We don't invent the cloud technologies. We don't invent the 3D technologies, but what we do is incorporate them, we integrate them, we deploy them, we do data interfaces, and we support them to create a more holistic solution for you. So we're like you, we're immersed a little bit on where the market's going for some of those core technologies. MES, manufacturing execution systems. It means multiple things to multiple people. We've been in the shop floor, SOS, SOP type documents, standard operating sheets, standard operating procedure documents for many, many years. Over the last several years, we've expanded that into more interactive, query-based work instructions. We've added issues, alerts to allow operators on the floor to make comments on the instructions, to make changes to the instructions. And we've added tracking of units, we've added tracking of operators, and that has expanded substantially in 2020. One of the other big changes we made in 2020 was the expansion into the and-on area, which we're going to talk quite a bit about today. We've made initial support for Google Glass because we understand augmented reality and Google Glass type technologies, maybe not the brand Google Glass, are really important to our customers. And the other thing we've done is really focused on supporting some of the key tools used in the assembly workstation, and DC torque tools above and beyond any other are an important tool for us to support. So using the open interface protocols to support DC torque tools is an initiative we began in 2020 that will continue in 2021. And then of course, 3D. Many of you are well aware of 3D. It's very heavily profiled today. So you'll see some great examples of how we're using 3D. What we didn't do is just take a 3D viewer and ship it with our product, okay? We've been spending the last 2.5 years trying to understand the interactivity between the 3D CAD model and the bill of materials it represents with the MBOM that you're working on and linking to and consuming in the process plan for manufacturing, with the 3D visualization of the product that you want to provide to the user in your work instruction. That's a whole different problem than just simply taking, hey, I can view 3D models. So we have been really working on the workflow and the integration. I think you'll really like what we've come up with. We're just now in the deployment phase of that to the first few customers. And throughout 2021, there'll be massive expansions on 3D. Security. Security, security, security. We heard it loud and clear that your organizations need a partner that you can trust, that is a secure partner. Last year, we enabled our single sign-on capabilities. We have 2 tracks of single sign-on, and we have a very powerful single sign-on capability. We've fully implemented TLS 1.2 for basically the secure communications to the internet of our information. We're actually even moving to 1.3. We have SQL Server trusted connections are supported. We have transparent data encryption at rest in your SQL Server database. We have dedicated services for SQL data traffic, and we've enhanced role-based controls. So our software, you should feel very confident, is very secure. Now, you know, we will always do the best we can. We can't guarantee 100%. There's no chance of any problem anywhere. Of course, no one can guarantee that. But what we can guarantee, what we can demonstrate is all the commitments we've made in 2020 and the commitments we're about to make in 2021 to ensure that whether you're using our tools on-prem, whether you're using our tools in the cloud, or whether you're having us support your application by looking at your data sets, that the people and the processes and the tools that are being used ensure very secure and safe handling of that data. Of course, video and 3D CAD model streaming are other complicated technologies, both from a performance perspective and a security perspective. We've made massive changes in those 2 technologies this year. Secured procedures physically. I carry one of these passes, as do all the Proplanner people now. To get anywhere in this facility, you need this pass. Everything we do, everywhere we go, is being recorded and can be turned off at a moment's notice. That includes not only our physical presence, but also our electronic presence. When we're looking at your data, when we're supporting you as a client, when we're in your servers, we have very secure procedures for doing that. Background checks of all of our employees every year, defined processes for addressing concerns. So if there's a problem, we know we have a defined plan to go after that. And these things are refining. These are things that we've been enhancing all along. We've made a major investment in 2020, and we have even doubled down on that investment for 2021. So our 2021 goals, user reporting, user interface flexibility. You're going to see a lot of changes for that as we go into this year. So if these are things that are important to you, we'd like to hear from you about that. Virtual build enhancements. I mentioned to you that 3D was an important technology enablement for 2020. We are going to continue to focus on the workflow, the manufacturing engineering workflow, the shop floor deployment and integration of 3D model workflow for 2021. Once again, we believe very strongly this isn't about just a technology. It isn't, look, I can view a 3D CAD model. It's how do I mine the knowledge of the model? How do I create hooks and integrations to the model? So as the model in the future gets updated, that I preserve the work instructions and the part consumption and other things that I've done in manufacturing, so that I don't have to just start all over again, which is typically the practice, so that I don't have to do screen captures of things and then go back and guess, okay, you know, which version of what model with what ECOs, engineering change orders, was that image created in. So that kind of life cycle integration through manufacturing and onto the shop floor is what you're going to see a lot more focus on. Another area we're going to be doing is presentation. Everybody likes to see assembly videos of products coming together. It helps in communication throughout the whole organization. That capability has been enabled with our 2020 enhancement of 3D, but you're going to see some really great new things in 2021 that's going to make it even quicker and easier to create very impressive images and animations of your 3D models through the assembly process. FMEAs and control plans. We made some major architectural enhancements to FMEAs and control plans through 2020. You're going to see some really great flexible failure modes and effects analysis capabilities and control plan integration all the way from engineering through the shop floor in FMEAs and control plans. We know it's a very important part for our clients. We are supporting the latest AIAG standards, Automotive Industry Action Group standards for handling FMEAs and control plans, but also supporting what was before, because not everybody's jumping on the latest capabilities. But most importantly, we're going to be enabling FMEAs and control plans in a very flexible way, user-controlled way. I already mentioned DC torque tools. It's a big focus of mine personally. I'm actually personally involved with technology development in the DC torque tool program, supporting the open protocol. MES interconnectivity, that's just part of that. So we're going to see a lot more capabilities on the shop floor integration with devices capability. And then I mentioned enhanced security. Once again, security, security, security. We are working right now on finishing agreements with companies such as Veracode or Rapid7. You may have heard of them. I'm not guaranteeing that exactly both of those or either of those will be included, but we're really just now getting to a point where we're very close to get an idea of the kinds of organizations we're working with for external support in security validation, penetration testing, code development. So we'll be really dialing that up throughout 2021. Enhanced audit trails and logging within our product, enhanced encryption algorithms, certificate-based protection of WCF endpoints, quarterly reviews of client and individual access to your on-prem or cloud-based instances. So once again, not just security that we're doing internally, that we're doing as we develop the product, that we're providing to you through the cloud or through the on-prem application that we give you, but also giving you additional tools for tracking what's going on and logging what's happening with users in your system. Penetration testing is very important. On cloud, on-prem, and even our own office, the way we support you, the way we develop code. We need to make sure that all of those environments are absolutely secure. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that people and software programs are constantly trying to penetrate our firewalls and our security procedures so that we can learn from friendly attacks how we might be vulnerable and continue to seal those holes. But this is going to be something that's going to be ongoing. As we all know, security isn't something you just do and then you can put on a shelf and move on. It's a daily commitment, literally a daily commitment to ensuring that the latest threats, the latest attacks that you're protected against. And I want to ensure you all that Proplanner is completely dedicated to making sure that we're safe. So that's really quickly what you're going to see today and where we've been and where we're going. I want to mention just a few things for those of you who may be new to Proplanner. One of the things I think that really separates Proplanner, it's a really key part of who we are, is that we are dedicated to the process, the workflow of bringing products from product engineering to the shop floor, right? That part where we define the process, where we map and consume the MBOM, the manufactured, or the EBOM into an MBOM, manufactured bill of materials, and we map and consume that in the process routing, that we're authoring the routing and the part consumption and part usage, the model option mapping, associated documents, whether they be CAD models or videos or even photos, all the way to the operator on the shop floor, and we track and produce and monitor what's being produced. That life cycle is really important to us. Anyone can create a tool for line balancing. Anyone can create a tool for time studies. Anyone can create a 3D tool to view CAD models. And of course, many people do. But what separates us is this workflow. And it's because of you and because of our customers who do assembly-based process planning, which is of course the focus of Proplanner, that we're able to constantly enhance this workflow to ensure that your ability to take that new product design, to take that new product change and go through the steps you need to go through to get it released to the floor, that process is as quick and painless and accurate as it possibly can be. And it's a journey. We're never going to be there. Every year we'll get better and we'll get better and we'll get better. But that's our commitment to you. And our workflow hasn't really changed much since the day we made this our mission, where we focused on creating these activities and making them intelligent with everything from quality information to time information to ergonomics information to component consumption information, and allowing you, as we mentioned, to map it to our very powerful line balancing technologies where we assign these tasks into the facility, which then means we're assigning parts and we're assigning tools. And then we're publishing that information to the operators on the floor who are working in those areas that we've assigned the task to. And we're maintaining that knowledge, that interconnectivity, so that any change, because we know it's coming, right? Every single day, that change is coming, is able to be propagated in a quality manner and also in a productive, efficient, effective manner. So we're committed to this workflow, and it gets better because you tell us how to get better. The other thing that I want to highlight is our technology stack. We're a 3-tiered architecture, and we have a lot of functionality here. I think that when people look at Proplanner, you're maybe used to the application or function that you're currently using, but what some people don't understand is how broad Proplanner is, from the shop floor dashboard, for example, for Andon, or the shop floor viewer client, or the MES functionality, or the server side reporting on the cloud or on the shop floor side. The application tier, where we serve the actual modules of time studies and line balancing in an interactive way. The back-end data tier, where we have some very sophisticated SQL capabilities for managing your data in many, many tables that are all related together, for allowing for everything from history management to version control to multi-user authoring, right? And this isn't just an expanded spreadsheet on steroids. This is a truly multi-tiered, multi-authoring environment, and the amount of effort that we spend to ensure that that is fast, that is capable, and that is secure is one of those things that maybe you don't see as using the application, but we want to just remind you that we have maybe half our team dedicated to this hidden part of the software. Our technology partners, Microsoft and Autodesk, have been long-term partners. As I mentioned, we've 2 years ago engaged on our path with TechSoft to provide all of our 3D technology. Last year, we announced our partnership with Proceedix as we get into Google Glass and wearables technologies on the shop floor, as well as into even potentially augmented reality. Not something that we have made a commitment to this year, but certainly something that we're watching very carefully. But the wearables field is an important field. And of course, our own work with Android, which is Google technology. So just in review, our mission is and always has been to help manufacturers electronically link product and process design through manufacturing execution to improve production quality and reduce lead times from design to manufacture. I know it's a big mouthful, but you can see that the focus of this company has always been on that workflow, trying to bring that life cycle down as low as we can, as short as we can, as responsive as we can, and as quality oriented as we can. And so we just want to make sure that everyone understands where we're going as a company, what we see as our mission, and we really appreciate the feedback and helping us achieve this objective for you, our clients. As I depart, I just want to mention that throughout the presentations today, please use the chat screen. There's also a little hand that you can raise. Paige, who's done a great job setting up this conference, a real thank you to Paige, who's also new to our company this year, who's responsible for the blogs and the webinars and the newsletters, helping us get our message out. She's running the conference on the back end, so you can always, if you need to, you can even email Paige, Paige @proplanner.com, or you can try to chat with her here. She's watching the chat board to help us stay on schedule. So once again, thank you for attending our first conference, and we hope you get a lot of value out of this conference. And we'll certainly have many more as we move on. Take care. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dave. As we head into our next presentation, I'll allow Dan Miner to introduce us to our next panelist.
Thanks, Paige, and thanks, Dave, for the nice introduction here. So we're going to shift into a discussion with Andy Kerr, who works with the Lilium team based out of Germany. Lilium is a company that Andy will actually introduce himself at one. It's one that many of you may not be familiar with. And he's actually going to take us through the thought process that this startup organization used for selecting a manufacturing process management system. So I think you'll all enjoy that. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Andy now.
Thank you, Dan. Just get my screen shared if you just bear with me for a second.
Loaded slide.
So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep, we can see it okay.
Super. Okay, so let's start. Cool. So hopefully you kind of enjoyed that introduction. Obviously, see, we're a startup based in Munich. So I'll do a brief introduction to myself. I won't bore you with my background too much, but just so you have a context of where I'm coming from. So always worked in the manufacturing engineering environment, so I have a lot of exposure, predominantly in automotive and at OEM level. You know, Land Rover, BMW, Tata Motors in India, across all technologies. So it's actually interesting to see how some of these systems interact around the different technologies and specifics around it. So at Lilium, I'm the head of manufacturing engineering for facilities and process, predominantly is my focus, but I do cover industrial engineering, infrastructure and construction of new facilities, all the process planning, cost engineering, technical maintenance. And I've actually just taken over a complete end-to-end role now as the business process owner. So I'm not only the MPM, which we're focusing on today with Proplanner, but also the MES, the ERP, IoT, and digital twin work streams. And there's a reason for that I'll talk about when we get later on in the presentation. So yeah, we're going to take you through how Lilium have approached selecting ultimately Proplanner. and how we kind of view this experience. So starting this off as the first presentation probably works very well because it's very early in the process. So a little bit about Lilium. So as you see from the video, we have an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. It's a 5-seater. It's basically all electric. It's got 300 kilometers of range and 300 kilometers an hour of speed. It's 5-seaters. It's 4 passengers plus a pilot at start, but it will become autonomous, and that will be part of the technology development as you see the kind of industry around eVTOL takeoff. Obviously, in order for this to operate in the future, one of the big key things will be noise pollution. Obviously, the reason helicopters are limited access into cities is simply because of noise and pollution in that environment. So this is key to operating in this environment going forward. We will be in a situation where we want to develop all these elements to kind of connect our world. We don't need heavy infrastructure, and that's kind of very key and important as well. Obviously, we've been a lot in news recently with regard to some partnerships, and you probably maybe see something in the States with regards to Orlando. And this is obviously starting to build up our connected network that we'll see. Commercial flights obviously planned for 2025. So our starting point, literally a blank page. So when you're in a startup environment, it's a very fluid. There aren't any baselines. There's no historical planning data. And so you are literally starting from that blank page. We have an incredibly highly skilled workforce, passionate about what we're doing, but predominantly sometimes limited with end-to-end industrial experience. That can be interesting from an approach of fresh ideas, but also lacking that kind of general experience that you kind of always used to lean on as you go through kind of your working environment. Really, we're in a situation is that, you know, we are so flexible in the way we are approaching stuff. We are very conscious of decisions we take today might not actually be the best decisions we have for tomorrow. And this means that we kind of aren't afraid to stop if we think we're doing something wrong and walk back, which is a lot easier perhaps in a startup environment. And just very key point on this, you know, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And this is very much what we're doing. And this is one of the kind of key points of looking at our functionality requirements that's led us down the path of selecting Proplanner as a technical partner. Okay, so assessment criteria. So really what we tried to do is structure our requirements around our business and capability evaluations, IT architecture and partner fit, and then obviously looking at total cost of ownership. You can't obviously look at systems and functionality without really understanding what the total cost of ownership is. And it's developing that value balance against the deliverables that any particular solution might offer us. So basically we started initially looking at the business elements. We created some criteria we wanted to mark about, weighted scoring, and that then looked at expanding that across into then how does that fit within our IT architecture? Are we cloud-based? Are we local server-based? How do we want to structure the architecture, and how does it interact with other systems within that ecosystem? And then obviously then we just looked at costings and the requirements of balance and what that might look like. So what we did was we then looked at other suppliers. So this is one of the suppliers we picked. I've just shown an example of indicative scoring against Proplanner. You can see the elements that we assessed within this. And actually, a lot of this is about functionality that we identified that actually drew a very nice synergy into what Proplanner actually offered as part of their core business. Plan for every part is not something everybody understands or sees the value in, but actually having had experience of it, it was quite critical to one of our requirements. Change management, work instructions, integration to ERP and MES, quality management, all kind of very important topics come in there. One thing you will see on there is certification. Certification obviously is very important when you have a new aircraft being developed, because we have certain legal requirements to certify the aircraft to fly. And actually the software requirements come under a very strict control within aerospace. And this is kind of one of the key elements. So it's not an obvious assessment criteria. And the thing key here is to look at your business model, to understand the potential impacts that you may or may not have at any one particular time, and think about that planning and what it means to you. It will guide you on where your criteria is and how good a particular solution would be to actually address those elements. So these are where we've considered. You kind of might then look on the right hand side of the screen. We're talking about like the company presentation, so support model. We're looking at cultural fit. Obviously, different companies will suit different applications. One of the key things I would just really like to point out with regards to Proplanner is that when we went through the presentations, and sales is an interesting one, end to end, the Proplanner team were consistent. It was the same people, the knowledge was great. When we talked to other supply opportunities, they didn't have all the core knowledge in one place. So it was very much bringing in multiple teams, different packages. It's a bit disjointed, and actually when you have elements of a planning environment, the connection of some of those elements become very critical. And actually, we talk about process FMEAs and control plans. A number of suppliers have that in a separate package. It's a completely separate team or a separate division within a company. And that can be complicated then to try and link it back into your planning environment, especially when you start to think about the process environment around line balancing. We move a process, we want to move the process, we want to move the equipment, we want to move our resources, but we also want to move all our quality planning around this. And a line balance might generate a requirement to redo an FMEA, alter the control plan, for example. So that was a big important element that we really kind of saw when we were going through these selection criteria. Okay, so what did we do when we were selecting an NPM system? We went through a really extensive requirement gathering. We ended up generating over 300 requirements. It's interesting because when you talk to different people, depending on what their core discipline is and their experience, their requirements are quite different and quite varied. And so when we ended up with this multi-page document with requirements across these 8 departments and 50 different employees interviewed, then you're in a situation where it's unmanageable. So we then went through a prioritization and some Pareto analysis with criticality, and we actually got those 300 reduced down to just 50. And 50 gave us an opportunity under 8 topics to focus what those really key value add elements were. And I would really stress that that is probably, when you're doing requirement filtering, it is probably one of the most important things to focus on. Because if you take over 300 requirements, what you're doing is you're going to dilute all your efforts, and you're not going to necessarily focus on what really adds value to your organization. So it doesn't sound like a big task, but actually it's fundamental to the foundation of being successful in your selection process. So obviously then we worked to select suppliers. We basically were in a situation where we ended up with 8. We did the full assessments, as I've just discussed, and we reduced that just literally down to 2. you could have had 3 or 4, but we decided we actually wanted to focus on our top 2 opportunities, and then really do the detailed analysis of what each partner could bring to the table. So that was kind of deliberate with regards to focusing our energies on getting the right areas, and you don't end up having to do multiple selection processes and down selecting. So you also save time, and it kind of becomes a bit more agile. Data flow. Data flow is quite interesting. You get lots of data, and you know, you see very often these days people talk about data lake and big data, but actually it's what does the value come from that data, and how do you control the data flow to make sure you don't lose anything. And that was kind of interesting with regards to our ERP and MES selection. And fundamentally, what we were doing is we've said, actually, we're not going to take a software offering and change our processes in the way we want to work. What we did was we took our processes and developed what solution meets our requirements. And some of the standard features you get sometimes force you into a process change, and it's something that actually at Lilium we refuse to compromise on. We feel that that compromises our business setup and our development, and we wanted to make sure that we would negate that by making sure that we get the right technical partner. And functionality at the core over bells and whistles. Interesting point, we saw a lot of presentations where features were being offered that have a wow factor in visualization, but actually add no real value at that point. So that was something that we kind of refused to kind of be drawn on or kind of sold. And that means that we kind of try to avoid the kind of event where you get buyer's regret. Just want to talk about some of our top lessons learned. So process is king. So a common phrase that's used, but it really does drive everything. And it's not something that we did in the initial phases of our selections because of the way we went about some of our element selection. So we chose our ERP system first because of business needs, and then connected the MES, and then came to the MPM system. And what we've realized as we're going through our initial implementation is actually we should have done it the other way around, and we should have driven it from our MPM system. And the process allows the data to flow in a clearer manner from an end to end. Everyone has a view of what utopia looks like, what's the greatest things that we could imagine, right? But actually not all of it adds value. And we've kind of struck off a couple of our initial views on what we would like to see because it doesn't fit where we are on our journey. Doesn't mean we won't add them in the future, or we might change our direction, but it means that at the moment, focusing on what adds value today, this actually was almost like it kind of shaded some of the other areas that we should have been looking at. I talked just briefly a minute ago about, we were talking about actually the MES. So our MES was attached more to our ERP system, but actually it should have been attached to our MPM system. And we're kind of looking at that and how we fix that situation. But the usability actually comes from driving it from our processes. So there's a nice little loop there that links back into why we would want to drive everything from process. Understand your manufacturing strategy. Yeah, so really outline what does your manufacturing strategy look like? What are the key elements that are going to drive those things, whether it's your facility layout, the process flow of your equipment, whether it's make or buy decisions. This is kind of helps you drive to selecting something that will work to fit that business strategy. And for us, it's also about scalability. As we grow and produce more and become a more higher volume manufacturer, that scalability becomes really key. And we've actually considered that scalability in selecting Proplanner as one of our technical partners. So understand your data, follow the flow, and question every step. So really think about where you're going with your data. What's the control mechanism for it? What does it link to with regards to feeding data back into other systems and the expansion of that data? And finally, don't be afraid to stop and change direction if you find yourself on the wrong road. So we make decisions today, we know they might be the wrong decision tomorrow, but it could be perfect based on what we know today. And we are very much in this startup environment. We know we're going to make decisions, we're going to make mistakes, and that shedding that fear allows us to actually say, no, you know what, we've got this wrong. What should we do now? And actually stopping and backing up, it stops us just going down a route that will not fit our business going forward. And that's a big thing. It takes a lot of courage to say, actually, I got this decision is not quite right for us today, but it's important. So just wanted to kind of highlight the typical architectures that we've kind of looked at our systems. So we've got planning and simulation, execution and administration. Most companies in the manufacturing environment have this kind of setup. So we're taking our EBOM. What are we doing with it? Well, we're driving it predominantly in this environment. We're dropping it through our MPM system. So it will come out of our PLM system into Proplanner. We'll do our EBOM to MBOM conversion. Then we'll start to detail our processes out, look at where our parts are, and then connect the Proplanner system and ecosystem into our ERP and MES systems. What we will see progressively is that MES will move almost into the center point between the planning and simulation and execution space. And we'll do that to give ourselves a technical advantage on how we manage the control of our processes at shop floor basis. So we're talking about work complete functionality, or at operational level, process validation that the work's been done. So yeah, this leads us then on to say, you know, what does it mean? Well, it means like we take our product life cycle, our CAD data, we develop it in our how manufacturing processes, and then when is our enterprise resources. So we try to get what, how, and when kind of linked together, and it's driving product into process to finished goods. And yeah, it's basically the core data coming from MPM as a single source of the truth, driving to our ERP via MES as a control mechanism. They're coexisting. They are various other suppliers, and the connectivity that's been supported by the Proplanner team has been actually invaluable. From an implementation point of view, I think we would be further behind if we didn't have the Proplanner team with us. So, key conclusions and why Proplanner? So we've got obviously sales phase, and we've got an implementation phase that we're in now. But really, what we're doing is seeing, you know, a strong technical offering that we know actually matches our expectations and our desire for what we see as the future. The team at Proplanner's knowledge is great. The presentations were very focused on the content and the capabilities of the system, and not sales. Everybody wants to sell you something, but actually it was more about the approach to here's our potential problems, and Proplanner saying, well, this is how we would solve that using this system. The process planning, the MTM, the quality aspects allows us to really kind of control at process level the details we want from our environment for manufacturing. I mentioned planning for every part is actually within it. It wasn't within many offerings, and I think this is a massive strength that Proplanner brings to the table. Generating the implementation plan was about generating confidence at the point of kind of negotiation. And what we actually see is that the implementation has actually been pretty much to plan, and in some aspects actually ahead of plan. And some of the delays that we've experienced are actually self-inflicted. As I mentioned earlier, we're not afraid to stop if we think we're going in the wrong direction. And then ultimately we talked about return on investment, but actually the cost competitiveness of what Proplanner is offering against the value set of what the features it can offer have been is in a really balanced and actually offers excellent value for money. The kind of implementation phases has been difficult in places, and it's been difficult because we've taken decisions at points which don't necessarily sit where we want to go. When we get further down the road, we have a clearer vision of this. But what we do see is we see that the knowledge base and how supportive the Proplanner team have been in kind of supporting it. And the key thing I've tried to emphasize as I've been speaking is really this is about a partner. It's not a supplier, and it's a journey we want to go to together. And we see some of the feature developments that have been already mentioned in the introduction actually will be very beneficial to us. But we also think that we can play a massive benefit to bringing some additional features and content to Proplanner and obviously the wider Proplanner customer base that we can all benefit from. And likewise, we would look to seek kind of the benefits of the experience of the more experienced customer base. And that's me finished. I'm more than happy to kind of answer any questions if there's any.
Yeah, everyone, you're able to click the raise hand button if you have any questions. It looks like we have one raised hand from Jose. Jose, I'm switching it to you're allowed to talk. You can unmute yourself now at this time if you do have a question. But for anyone else, if you do have questions, just click the raise hand button and we'll get you to be able to speak with Andy. Okay, it looks like Jose isn't on right now then, but we do have a raised hand from Dave. So Dave, you're able to unmute yourself if you like to add anything.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Thanks again, Andy. That was an excellent presentation. It was great. I just want to tell everybody we didn't practice. So our focus, I guess, at Proplanner on our process flow is is coming across. I was curious, I know that 3D was also an important technology for Lilium. I was curious, and you mentioned how you saw a lot of great graphics. I'm curious if you can share a little bit about how you intend to leverage 3D information through manufacturing, in particular, what your goals are at Lilium for the kinds of, I guess you'd say, work instruction content you want to give the operators, given that you are a very sophisticated, low volume, high technology supplier. What's the expectation at the workstation level for 3D?
So the workstation concept from actual physical design is putting the operator at the center of it. It's very much based on the critical data we need. Historically, work instructions can be multi-stepped and shown in that way, but we're changing that to operational based steps that can be more articulated. And one of the things that we would look to do in the future is connect this Proplanner ecosystem into some of our technology and connect that then up through our digital twin. So something as simple as an operation that calls for a part linked to a pick to light or a scan or a haptic feedback smart glove technology, where we can actually then have that interaction, which removes the manual elements, or perhaps then stepping a process on, because we can feed the data. The more we start to get into 3D data on the shop floor, then it's about part recognition or complex processes. And we'll also then look at making sure that we can do some validation in a virtual reality world. And we actually have a virtual reality development area that's actually also includes like some of the virtual reality treadmills. And this is kind of very important from the digital twin. but the 3D data has to be very clear and understandable. And if you have multi-step processes and you're trying to show a lot of data on the screen, the operators won't necessarily use it, or they'll get confused. So that's kind of how we plan to approach that.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Andy.
I see that Emilson also has a question. Did you see that page? He
Yep, I was going
asking-
to mention that, but you can
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, Emilson was just asking how long the implementation was. What's your implementation plan?
Yeah, so the implementation is ongoing. I think the initial kind of implementation was quite kind of aggressive at 6 months. But one of the things we realized was that we needed to get other elements. So I talked about the ERP and the MES not quite where we would like it to be. So we will probably add another 3 months on. That delay is a deliberate delay, and it's actually not down to anything to do with Proplanner, but Proplanner have been very supportive of it. But it's quite aggressive, and it's a lot of work, but we want to get it right.
Thank you. It looks like that was all of our questions for today. So thanks for joining us, Andy. We appreciate it.
Oh, no
As
problem.
we move on, yeah, thank you. As we move on to our next session, I'll have Bondo, if you wouldn't mind introducing us to our next group of panelists from Caresoft.
Sure, thanks, Paige. So the next group that is going to talk at the conference is Caresoft. As David mentioned earlier, Caresoft has been a very valuable partner with Proplanner for several years now. They are the largest user group for implementing the solution. They're also a technology partner that help us in developing and contribute a lot to the key features of the solution, especially in this 3D deployment that we just did. So I would, welcome Manoj, Krish, and NLK from Caresoft, and I will hand it over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bando. This is Manoj. Just to introduce myself, I'm part of Caresoft and handling the North America customer relationships for our customers. As Bando mentioned, we have been working with Caresoft, with Proplanner for many years now, and supporting a lot of customers, theirs and ours, in automotive and ag and construction and tier 1 space. So as an implementation partner, we have the biggest user base of Proplanner users. So today we have structured the session in a way where we will just spend a couple of minutes to showcase what Caresoft is, what we do, and then deep dive into how we use Proplanner, different modules like assembly planner in process planning, where it helps our customers to seamlessly integrate different data points from a process planning perspective, where they don't have to jump into different softwares or different databases. It's one point solution where the information flow from engineering BOM to manufacturing BOM to logistics from a PFPP perspective. So that's an area which we will cover. And also we will be covering how 3D virtual assembly is gonna help our customers in launching new products, where they don't have to go to a CAD system to see the CAD, and it will eliminate any surprises which can come during the actual implementation of the product. So starting with our high level, what Caresoft is all about. We are an engineering and a product company. We were founded in 2007, headquartered in Detroit. With a global presence, majority of our presence is in continental Europe. That's our biggest area. US is another biggest market, and we have our offshore centers in Asia. We are ISO and ITAR certified, as we work for certain of our clients which are in defense. So that's how we are structured with a good global presence. From a business perspective, we have 4 pillars. From our technology, digital twin, benchmarking and cost reduction, which we do for automotive space, where we benchmark different cars and help different OEMs to save, be competitive and save cost. We have our own products, basically in the design space, and then we have our engineering solutions, where myself, Krish, and LK, who are on this conference, belongs to. We are from our manufacturing domain, which helps our customers to launch new products or do continuous improvement projects. And this is where we use Proplanner a lot, and which helps us to manage the process planning documents, launch new products, handle the logistics designs for our customers and clients. So we will be deep diving in further slides how Proplanner helps us doing this from a process planning or assembly planner perspective, and also how we are using the 3D virtual build to help our customers to launch their new products more efficiently and effectively. So I will hand it over now to Krish, I think, who will take over and go through the process planning portion from our assembly planner perspective. Krish, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Krish.
Yes. Okay, good morning. I think there's a small glitch in my mic. To quickly introduce myself, I'm Krishnamurthy Sengote, and I'm based out of Chicago. I come from a strong 20 years of manufacturing background, working in various verticals within manufacturing. And I'm with Caresoft for the past 6 years. I would now like to get into the presentation. I'll switch on the video so that you can see the slides much better. Okay, so customization is the key mantra in today's business environment, right? So the USP of any business is the possibilities for a customer to customize the product configuration basis their needs. So this level of product customization creates extreme complexities in the manufacturing environments in terms of multiple models, options, and various combinations. So in the next 15 minutes, I would like to take you through the major pain points for manufacturing organizations and how we are able to solve the pain points using Proplanner as an integrated manufacturing process management system. And we will also talk about and deep dive into the 3D virtual assembly module that we are supporting. So I request please park your questions at the end of the sessions, and we can help answer all your questions at the end of the session. So talking about the MPD documentation, so we develop and maintain standard time at elemental level by defining activities which include time, work steps, resources like toolings, quality, information, workstation information, consumptions, and we finally map against the model and options. So we use most MODAPs or MTM based on the customer preference of PMTS. This is the baseline for creating line balancing scenarios based on the customer pull, and eventually the SOPs are published to the floor using shop floor viewer for the use of workforce. Now, talking about the ECRs and ECOs, so with significant disruption happening in technology, product design goes for a constant optimization or change to adopt newer technologies or improvements, enhancements, right? So this again creates a need for a constant upgrade of the manufacturing systems, manufacturing support systems like material feeding and other download documentation processes and systems. Engineering change management system plays a vital role in handling these changes. Now, Proplanner as an integrated system comes very handy in managing and implementing these changes. So we use engineering change management system within Assembly Planner to handle the ECO changes at the process level and support the logistics changes as well. Assembly Planner can communicate with ERP system to capture the changes in BOM and customer order data. So the engineering change management system within Assembly Planner creates automatic alerts to changes in BOM so that appropriate changes can be made in the system. I would say we define and maintain the process data in a 3-tier structure, like routing, operations, and activities. And we then associate and update time studies, resource requirements, part consumptions, and external documents. And more in the, it could be in an assembly process, it could be in logistics, or any functional area within a given manufacturing organization. So again, pretty much it depends from an organization to organization. That could be standard assembly process. It could be a discrete process as well. So depending on the type of the product configurations, we support using Proplanner. And again, the changes, it's very imperative and important when the changes are triggered, it reaches to the respective functions and people are able to work on that and make sure the engineering changes are implemented on time and the old parts are purged out of the systems. So that way, the new system new parts comes in place and systems are kept clean and healthy. So, so from that perspective, ECR and ECO management support has been crucial, and we are supporting our key customers using Proplanner as a main system. Now, moving on to the next slide, I would like to give a quick insight on the 3D virtual assembly. So 3D virtual assembly is a new module in Assembly Planner, which increases the speed and quality of launching accurate work instructions and line balancing scenarios to the shop floor. So at this time, I would now like to invite LK. So LK has extensively worked on the 3D virtual assembly module, with Proplanner, and also he has tested several use cases as well. And I would now invite LK to present the 3D virtual assembly portion.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Krishna. Myself, LK Lakshmikant. I am working with Proplanner, using Proplanner software from last 10 to 11 years now. So I will go through these virtual wheel features as of now. So virtual wheel features is the integration of the product, process, BOM, or the components that helps in viewing parts in the 3D visual graphical representation. The prerequisite before doing that, we have to map the BOM and the consumption through ECO or ECR, or if any new model comes or options are introduced. So we document all these things using our Proplanner, like a routing operation activity. Within activity, we define the BOM. So using this virtual build module, how we work is, so there is a concept of workspace that has been introduced. So you can create a new workspace, or you can work on open workspace, and then you can see the process tree, the consumption grid, and the 3D viewer integration of all three in one screen, where you can now view your product and process in a sequential order as defined. You can, when you start clicking on this process one by one, you will see your model is getting built on the right hand side as it is progressing. So we are using this Proplanner 3D. What you can do is you can introduce the 3D concept in this view, and you can add your parts onto it. Can you go to next screen? Basically, in Proplanner virtual build, you have multiple CAD views. So you can work on these CAD views by on and off, doing on and off those CAD models. Next screen. And there is an image editor on it where you can edit multiple images at a time. You can align multiple views on same canvas, customize annotation, you can add your callouts, your notes onto it, you can integrate them, and then you can save this image. Once you save this image, what will happen is it will automatically go to your activity. Next screen. So here you can create this is image editor. You can take multiple snaps. You can sequence them. Then you can drag and drop into the image editor, and you can create your recipes at one screen. So basically what this virtual build helps is it integrates all the product, process, and BOM together into one screen where you can use your graphical representation to create your activity. Next screen. So basically the benefits of using this virtual build will be, it is ease of creating the work instruction. It is the ease of processing the issues. Because once you create an issue, then later on the maintenance of issues become easy. You can just open your existing workspace. You can go edit your BOM and your work steps, and you can recreate your new images based on the new parts. And you can see the progress you build of the work order or instructions or sequence of activity at one go. So that is the main features of virtual build, where you can play with new product introduction. You can create the complete list of sequence of activities, and you can view how your model is getting built activity by activity. You can analyze and you can modify as required. Thank you. Krishna, you can take over.
Yep. Thank you, LK. So moving on to the next slide, let's talk about the MUDA analysis, MUDA and ergonomics. So in today's manufacturing environment, be it automotive or ag and construction business, there is a constant need to focus and to improve productivity and efficiency by eliminating the non-value added activities in the process. And especially in a complex environment where there's multiple models and options, where the work content varies from model to model, it is very important to understand the non-value added activities so that the line engineers can focus on those areas and specifically work on continuous improvement. Again, when I say this, so how do we get the data? So Proplanner helps in slicing and dicing the time. Again, all the codes and categorizations are built within the system. Every customer, we understand every customer has different codes and structures. So those codes can be customized based on the customer requirement. And once we run the scenarios, we will be able to pull out reports and from a Pareto perspective on the NVA's non-value added activities, semi-value added or business value added activities, and value added activities. And we all know that NVA is the key area to focus to improve or eliminate the waste out of the system, right? So Proplanner helps in churning out this data and publishing the reports. So what we do is we on the back end work on maintaining the health of the system. So we do it both at on-site and also we virtually manage things, and we support customers so that the floor engineers can focus on Gemba-based Kaizen improvements. And similarly, we also support on the Muri analysis. Again, Muri has a 9-point standard Muri, and also there is a 17-point empowered Muri, which are inbuilt within the system. So where we can, at an elemental level, under activity level, we can pull and map the scores and generate the motion count to see the scores of activities and identify potential areas of improvement. So once the chart is published, then we know which all activities fall under level 3 Muri, and those are the areas that would need an improvement. It could be manipulator that would need to help improve the ergonomic level of an operator, or it could be any other manufacturing support system that is needed. So Proplanner constantly helps generate this changes, and whenever there is a small Kaizen that is implemented and seen sustained in the manufacturing environment, that can be again updated. So the system is always dynamic to show what is actuals, and that for various reasons. It could be for the internal process improvement, internal plant safety improvement, or making sure that plant is aligned with the plant KPIs, or from all those perspectives, this information helps. And be it at an activity level or a sub-assembly level or an assembly level. Okay, so next most important aspect is the line balancing. Line balancing is very critical, again, in a mixed model production environment, and Proplanner supports heavily in handling the line balancing scenarios, especially when a take rate changes, right? So when a volume change happens, then there is a need to rebalance the line, and that is where Proplanner comes handy. So since the systems are pretty dynamic, we support to rebalance the line, and we run Amazumi charts. So Amazumi shows which are the specific stations that needs focus. If there are like 15, 20 stations, you don't need to work on all 15 stations. You need to know which are the 2 stations or 3 stations where activities are overflowing. Then knowing that, you can focus on the specific activity and move chunk of activities to an either a previous or a subsequent station. That way you can balance the line, and then also plan for a optimal manning of the production line. So from that perspective, Proplanner's line balancing helps in maintaining the health of the manufacturing process. And talking about the mass update, Proplanner as a tool has the ability to mass update and helps save a lot of time and effort when we need to update activities to map new models and options. Finally, talking about the PFAP module. Again, we spoke a lot about the assembly planning module. Equivalently, the logistics-based PFAP module is equivalently important. Now, as we focus on the process side of things, the line side material presentation is important as well. So PFAP module helps define locations for receiving, storage, and delivery. It helps generate a kitting list based on specific units on assembly line. And it also helps in generating tickets based on the usages of Kanban and e-Kanban, helps track part shortages as well. So again, if we have let's say if there is a machining discrete process, and you have to have a focused improvement project, then we can generate man-machine charts. If it is like a single unit exchange of die or SMED kind of projects, then generating man-machine chart helps in getting to know the specific areas where there are buckets of opportunities for improvement, and we can categorize into machine time, pallet time, and manual activities, etc. And then we can see what all activities can be moved from internal to external, so that the machine availability can be improved. And from a quality standpoint, a Proplanner module is built with the PFMEA strongly. And again, when you have a PFMEA integrated into a manufacturing system, then you don't need to necessarily separate maintain a separate documentation for PFMEA, because it is already integrated, and then you'll be able to map against the process. And when we finally come out with the RPNs on the severity, occurrence, and reduction, then the RPN numbers tell when it reaches a threshold of, say, 80 or a 90 score, then we know these are the top 10 activities in a given assembly line that needs focus in terms of developing an process POPEOC or a process control element, be it an preventive mode or reactive mode POPEOC. So that piece is also integrated within Proplanner, and that way I would say, it's a complete one place, one integrated system which takes care of the industrial engineering piece, process engineering, logistics, and quality as well. So these are the, I would say, the few critical aspects from a Proplanner standpoint. I know there are several modules and features available in Proplanner, but in our experience, we spoke about some of the critical aspects that we partnered with the Proplanner, and we supported with supporting multiple customers in ag and construction space and automotive as well. So this ends my last slide of presentation. Now we would like to open the forum for question and answers, and we'll be happy to answer if there is any specific questions.
Just a reminder to everyone that you're able to raise your hand if you have a question, and we can unmute you. But for now, we do have one question from Sanjay asking, how does virtual build module work with larger assembly files? And the example they gave was an entire car assembly.
Okay, myself, okay. Hi, Sanjay. Actually, what happened is these CAD modules are there. So these CAD modules can be converted into PRC and HSF files. The size of these files are very less, half of it or 1/10 of it of actual JT. So it enables you to work on the heavy equipment also.
Does that answer your question?
If there are no questions,
Yeah,
LK, maybe I would like to see if you can answer, if you can just put a few words on the number of steps that reduced with having the virtual build inside of Proplanner compared to what you were doing prior. Just a brief description would be good.
Okay, Abhishek. Actually, prior to this virtual build, what was the scenario is we used to work in multiple applications. For process one application, and for 3D, we were using different applications. We used to have that application to create our SOPs, then save those SOPs and convert them, then import into the Proplanner. So this step is reduced drastically. And the second step, what we're used to there is, with this integration of workspace, the ECUs, creating of the ECUs and maintaining of the ECUs time will reduce drastically. So I can see these are the benefits using the virtual build. Major benefits.
I apologize, I was on mute. We do have one raised hand from Jonah. Jonah, you have been unmuted. If you'd like to speak and ask any questions you may have.
Yeah, I came in a bit late to the conference here, so maybe you talked about it earlier, but I've listened to all of the last half hour or so. The CAD import or inputs are lightweight formats, of course, but you, how do you get the whole structure in correct with Proplanner? I mean, the CAD boom could have a different structure than the boom that you have in Proplanner and so on.
Yes.
Is it difficult to ensure this? I mean, do you have to do a lot of preparation to get the 3D viewer correctly synced with the CAD drawings?
Yeah, there is two ways to answer. There is a vehicle integration team is there who usually structure this CAD data into one complete structure of the JT. So this JT, if you insert it, it's very easy to use it. You can convert to lightweighted and insert and you can work on. But if you don't have a structured data, then you can activity by activity, you can import this data and work on the activities. Is that answered your question?
Yeah, somewhat. I don't know if is it normally well structured so that they that you can use?
Normally it is well structured because for every plant there will be a vehicle integration team who works on the structuring of the CAD data. As an end user, we just take that well structured JT and put it in the CAD module into the Proplanner and work on those in the virtual build.
Yeah. Okay. But there is still normally, I mean, differences in how the CAD boom is structured compared to what the manufacturing boom in Proplanner would be, right?
Yeah, it is structured a little bit differently, but in Proplanner, what happened is they have built some queries which integrates this embalm with this CAD bomb, and you can work on it. And if you like, Abhishek, you can add some
Yes,
more.
Johan, I can answer to that. So what we are doing in the virtual build module is depending on the type of extract, right? So it could be as LK was mentioning, a JT file or a some other format, a Creo file from some CAD software. We do have to spend some time in analyzing the data inside the CAD. In this particular implementation with Caresoft, we had to do that analysis and then connect our bill of material data, embalm part number, embalm information, with a certain field inside the CAD file, right? So that's how we related that. Okay, this particular part number in Proplanner is found in this field on the CAD in the CAD file, right? And that's a very simple step. We're just mapping our part number to the corresponding field on the inside the CAD data. Once that relationship is done, then we are able to easily search through the CAD and find the part numbers we want. Now, you're right that the structure of the bill of material on the embalm side or the manufacturing BOM in Proplanner may not be one-on-one with how the CAD data is structured, right? And as LK was mentioning, typically there are teams that try to bring that close, but it need not be one-to-one. So our focus is to start from the end part numbers that we have being consumed in that activity, find them in the bill of material structure of the CAD file, and display those, in that particular view, right? If we have a level in embalm, let's say some kind of a part grouping that was created for consumption purposes, that's missing in the CAD, that's fine. We don't find that part, we skip it altogether, but we focus on the part numbers that we found and we display those. So end result may be that in the CAD file, I may see a much bigger structure, a much bigger assembly than what my particular activity is focused on. But the idea here is to show the user, the end consumer, what those parts are and how they're oriented, right? So I think the structure differences between embalm and CAD are typically based on groupings that are introduced in the embalm for the purposes of manufacturing, right? But the overall structure usually, the high level assemblies usually don't change much between embalm and CAD. So I think to answer your question, we're going through the part numbers in consumption and finding them in the CAD and putting them up.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, we have time for one last question here quick. They don't have a name, but with the username XA634, you've been unmuted if you'd like to ask your question. Just one moment, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you okay.
Okay, thank you. So I have two questions. One is our CAD here is Creo, and then we take it to the next step, which is Team Center, and we have to baseline it so everything is aligned. Is that with virtual build, we're going to be able to eliminate that Team Center package and just go directly to Creo to Proplanner?
Actually, from JT, what happened is you can still go ahead with a Creo or from the JT model. From JT model, there is a Proplanner software onto it where that can convert the JT model into PRC or HSF file. And this HSF file or PRC file can be imported in the Proplanner and you can work on.
Okay, so no need to go to Team Center We can go directly from Creo to virtual build.
Creo, you need to convert to the JT file, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about the step file to the HSF file that
Yeah, I think-
Abhishek can answer.
Right. You can convert the step file to HSF or PRC and load that. But again, that it's a similar question as what Johan had asked. It's the structuring of the CAD. You know, what are you doing in Team Center Engineering? And I think Team Center Engineering is trying to line up the CAD data closer to the MBOM from your MRP system, right? So that's really the need to go to an intermediate engineering system like Team Center. But we, you know, if the EBOM structure, like what's released from your engineering system and your your bill of material structure are in, sorry, your Creo structure are lined up together, then we really don't need to go through the Team Center conversion.
Okay.
But I would go back to the need. I would go back and check what else you're doing through Team Center Engineering. I think you're managing your configurations, your option bombs through there, right? If I'm not mistaken.
That's yes, that's part of it. My second question is that you say we're going to be able to store all these images in a library. Does that image also include all the balloons and notes and instructions for future edits?
Yes. So there are two ways of doing this. One is what the approach that we've taken traditionally with that LK was trying to explain. You know, in there we are going into an activity. We're scanning the consumption of the activity. We're searching for those part numbers in the CAD file, and we're creating a view of the CAD file, taking a snapshot of that CAD, putting callouts on it, annotating it, saving it against the activity, and publishing it to the floor as a static image. Right? It's an image file at the end. If you were to ever go back to the activity and maybe change a balloon or change the orientation of the image or put in a new image, you are allowed to edit that view again, right? So it's not like once you create the image, you cannot edit the annotations again. You are allowed to edit that view, change it, and republish it. But you know, with some of the work that we are doing now, we are trying to put in a 3D viewer on the shop floor. So rather than sending any image, the user should be able to look at the CAD data that was published for that particular activity, right? So that gives the user more flexibility in magnifying, moving things around and turning and looking at the details of the CAD rather than a static image. So, to answer your first question, yes, you are allowed to go back to the image and edit it and create a new snapshot. But moving forward, I envision that you probably want to move to something like the CAD viewer that gives the ultimate freedom to the viewer on the line.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on with our next session here. Dan, feel free to introduce us to our next panelist, please.
Yeah, thank you. Great dialogue on the CAD integration discussion. So next up, we have Lindsay Youngren from the ROI team. She's going to talk about the usage of Proplanner and the overall kind of work process at a paint department and some line balancing work. So take it away, Lindsay.
All right, thanks, Dan. Let me just share my screen here. All right, so yeah, as Dan said, I'm going to be talking about how we did some line balancing and standard work creation in an automotive paint shop. So a little bit of background of ROI and myself. So we're an engineering consulting firm. We have been around since 2016. I've been around kind of since the inception. We've grown to, I think we have about 60 employees now. So we've experienced a lot of great growth. I'm a project manager. I've worked mostly in tier 1 and big 3, mostly automotive. Majority of my time I've been with FCA and GM. The last couple of years I've been kind of here and there to various smaller clients. I have a bachelor's in industrial and operations engineering from U of M and an MBA from Wayne State University. So for the purposes of this project, I was part of a 2-person team that went into this client and helped them with kind of starting from the ground up line balancing and standard work. They had very little. So about our client, it's an automotive manufacturer that has seen a ton of growth in the last few years. With this growth, they haven't been able to meet customer demand. They're using a factory that was built in the 80s. They've done a lot of changes to it, but they are still somewhat limited to the layout of the original plant. They're running production 24/7. They have a 4-shift pattern where they work 4 days on, 3 days off. So you have 2 day shifts and 2 night shifts. They're building 4 different vehicles, and they pretty much do everything internally, including stamping, plastics. They have 3 body shops, 3 general assemblies, and they actually have 2 paint shops now, but when we were starting this project, they just had 1. And the reason we were brought in is because of all this increased demand, they were not able to keep up with it. And they identified that the paint shop was one of the main issues, where you have 3 body shops and only 1 paint shop. So we were brought in, we kind of did our initial investigation. So one of the big things we saw is that not only is there no standard work, but there's no standard process. So if I go in on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. and watch a station, by 4 o'clock that day, you might be seeing a totally different process. There might not even be a person there anymore. So that was a huge problem with not only throughput, but also quality. So all in all, there were 52 jobs that we looked at. As I said, about those 4 vehicle models, and all of the models had unique option content. No existing system or standardized process. Some areas in the plant have their own systems. Some of them use Excel, some of them use like a cloud SharePoint. There's a homegrown system that they've started using in some areas now as well. And within just the 1 paint shop, we even saw multiple. If you talk to one engineer, they use one thing, and their partner working on the next line over will be using something totally different. Some of the jobs did have process sheets, but they were never accessible by the floor. They were always kept in someone's computer, and not even all of the engineering team would have access to them. There would be different versions that may or may not be accurate, and it was always hard to kind of figure out what is the accurate version. Do we have an accurate version? So that was kind of some of the main issues we saw. And after that initial investigation, we actually discovered that Proplanner had already been in use in a different area of the plant, and they still had licenses active. So we were able to get in touch with the people that had used it in the past, and they were still using it in General Assembly, in one of them. So we were able to get with them, use some of their licenses, and get some knowledge on how they had used it and what they were able to do, and take that over into the paint shop. So after we had kind of decided Proplanner is the tool, we went in and evaluated all of the jobs based on the process sheets that they might have had, but mostly we actually went out onto the floor, talked to the operators, talked to the team leads, observed the jobs, took a lot of videos. Actually, in the middle of this project, COVID hit, so we had to kind of scramble in the last couple of days and took videos of all the jobs right before we got sent home for a month. So Proplanner was really helpful to be able to take those videos and input into actual work content. So all in all, once we were done with everything, we ended up with reducing 18 heads a shift. So over 4 shifts, that's 72 people that we were able to optimize, which is a savings of over $5 million a year. And this took us all about 8 weeks to complete. So kind of the specifics of after we had observed the jobs, how we used Proplanner to get to that final solution. We created routings for each area. So ED, booth, wet stand, final inspection, each line had its own routing. And then within each routing, activities corresponded to each station. We always use a time standard called MODAPS to document all jobs. So we used MODAPS and estimated times, which was a stopwatch. Stopwatches we only used for if there was like a robot sealer time that needed, that was a consistent, always a time. And then we also used model codes to break out each of the 4 vehicles to specify any of the unique option content. So once we actually put everything into Proplanner, we were able to create line balances that just showed a current state. I would say this was far and away the most useful tool, or the most useful like part of communicating with the client of here's what you actually have right now versus here's what you need. So we were able to use those graphs to really show here's your tack time, here's your efficiency. You guys have 15 people and you actually only need 10 or whatever the number would have been. So after we were able to do the line balancing, the current state, we started playing around with what the future state would be using the line balancing module itself with the drag and drop elements. We also worked a lot with the process engineers and the actual people on the floor to run trials, make sure everyone agreed, and get that involvement from them. So once we were gone, they would be able to kind of take the torch and continue using the tool and continue with all the improvements. So this is an example of slatline, 2 of the line balances we did. So this was the current state where you can see their tack time was 54 seconds, and 85% utilization, about 46 seconds. None of those jobs are coming even close to that 85%. This is what we ended up with, where we took out 2 jobs, balancing that content over the previous jobs, and getting everything a little bit closer to that 46 seconds. And so once we figured out here's what we want to do for our future state, the next step was creating standard work. So this is just an example of some of the standard worksheets that we printed out and have posted at every station. So just a pretty standard elemental description. They asked us to include time in all of these just because that kind of alerts the operator on if they're falling behind or not. This client has a lot of operator turnover, so it becomes a really helpful training tool when they're looking at this to learn their job and knowing if they're in the ballpark or not of how long they're taking. And that's also a huge indicator of if repairing defects is taking longer than we're showing in our standard work, that there's a possibility that there have been quality issues. So that's also served as a big benefit for team leads to be able to communicate better with their supervisors and more quickly catch problems as they are occurring. So from this project, as I said before, the line balance graphs, we definitely loved. That was the #1 thing that the client liked. And it was a huge tool, not only with our direct client, but with everyone we worked with, the process engineers, the team leads, the supervisors on the floor. It was just a really great way to easily say, here's what you have, and here's what you could have, and here's the changes you could make. And with that, the line balance module, you can drag and drop elements within the line balance module onto whichever bar to see what a change would look like if you made it. So that was a really easy way to get involvement from people on the floor who may not know how to use Proplanner really in depth, but we can work with them to just drag and drop, and here's what this would look like. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's try it. Oh, maybe that won't work. So that was a huge benefit as well. And then just in general, standard work, having it is a tool that the client is able to use now to train and check. Previously, they didn't really have any way to train or check other than whoever the person that was around on that shift at that time what they had known, their word of mouth knowledge. So now there's a documented way that this is how everything should be done, and this is what we're tracking to. Probably the biggest complaint that we've had from our client, now that they are in charge of using this tool on their own, is just now that when you are making changes in the line balancing module and you've decided on what change you want to make, it's not really easy to then apply the change to the routing. What we ended up doing is we'd make the changes in the line balancing module, have everything how we wanted it, take a screenshot, and then go back into the routing and make the changes in the routing versus applying the changes. It just made it a lot easier to track. And we had a couple of instances where changes were applied and the person who applied them lost track of what was changed. It just got really confusing and murky. Another thing that we had some challenges with was value add and non-value added classifications. For this client, they had about 30 different choices within value add and non-value add at a code level. So if I have an activity that has, 30 different codes that make up walking to the car, placing something to the car, identifying a defect and fixing it, you would have to go through each of those 30 elements and classify which value add or non-value add you would want. So that ended up being just too time consuming and we weren't able to really utilize it. And so the Yamazumi charts in theory would have been really great, but we just weren't able to kind of make that happen with all of the different classifications. And finally, probably the biggest issue we ran into on this project, and this happened both with my team and the client's team, was cloning routings and not knowing that there's a little check mark button that links everything together. So if I clone a routing, now I have 2 of them and I change an activity in one, or I delete an activity in one, it deletes it everywhere. So that caused a little hassle more than once of trying to get that data back and figuring out what was deleted and when. Let's see. So from the end of this project, the client is still maintaining Proplanner in this original paint shop. And we were also able to use it in a second paint shop that launched a couple of months later. So we ran into some of the cloning routings issues. Everyone is trained, including the floor supervisors. So they are able to actually go in and make changes, usually hand in hand with process engineers, to make their own optimizations and tracking. So all shifts are also now following the same process because they have that standard work tool for training and checking. And one of the big benefits we saw from this is that the huge increase in throughput and quality. So throughput increased by 20% in the first 2 months. It's since increased even more, I think, to about 40% more than when we started. And then overall quality has also improved as well. So that was all I had. I can answer any questions anyone has now.
It looks like right now we don't have any raised hands, but as always, if anyone has a question, please just raise their hand or submit it in the Q&A chat as well. And it looks like we have one question from Dave. Dave, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay. We really appreciate it. And one of the questions I had, I know you're a pretty strong MODAPS person. You've used it for quite a bit. What was your experience there with regards to the client? Was the client really familiar with the predetermined time system? In other words, were they using a predetermined time system, or is that something that you brought into the customer?
So I'd say yes and no. So as we said, that there's like a bunch of different systems depending on who you talk to or what area you're in. We found that within paint shop, they were mostly using stopwatches, but in other areas of the plant, sometimes they actually were using MODAPs in a couple of places. They also use MTM. They've also used MOST. So they definitely know what predetermined time was, but we kind of were able to show them that MODAPs is usually the most beneficial system to use. And we trained all of their process engineers and they're all now MODAP certified.
Okay, good. So did you use any, with Proplanner, a task has multiple times. You can do an observed time, you can do an estimated time, and you can do a predetermined time, which is kind of unique, right? Most systems just have a time. Did you use any of that hybrid time capability? Like, did you leave in the estimated time and then fill in a predetermined and then do the priorities?
Yeah.
Did you have the stopwatch time? How did that work?
Yep. So a couple times we did that. One was when, as we got sent home from COVID and we were working from home and off videos and process sheets, we used those estimated times then. And then we were able to go back into the plant and really kind of narrow down and this is exactly what it was. Then we were able to change those times into the actual MODAPs codes. We also used it when we were helping with the second paint shop, where we just cloned the routing, changed all of the times to estimated. And then once we were able to actually observe pilots, then we started to change those estimated times to calculated.
Great, excellent. I just wanted to kind of end too. I really appreciate you bringing up, the learning curve of things, even for our organization, of things we can do better. And I want to mention that those challenges you ran into were, great documented issues with our workflow that we are prioritizing to make easier to use, better, and if you will, to your point, kind of try to make certain features like, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's the power. We have to be careful of how we do the UI, but thank you very much. That's been great.
Yeah.
I think Johan had a question.
Yep. You should be able to speak at any time now.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. You mentioned here that you had problems with all the different classifications of value added and non-value added. Why did you have that many? Was it a requirement, or couldn't you
So
just?
I think we actually, with Dan, we kind of realized that the client had set some of those classifications themselves. So it was kind of a catch-22 of like, they had all these classifications and they wanted these Muda charts, but they wouldn't let us change it or make it any easier. When they were just using Proplanner in one small area, I think it was a little more manageable to have like 30 different classifications versus what we wanted was 3. So
So lessons learned was that it wasn't really a Proplanner issue. It's more that you have to decide on what level of detail you want to go into and what is feasible to work with.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any other questions right now. Does anyone have any last minute questions? We have time for another 1 or 2 if anyone would like to raise their hand at all now. Just give it a second or 2, and if not, we can just keep moving on. Okay, well, thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for presenting today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so we'll move on now to our next presentation, which is going to be actually from Proplanner, Bondo and Arul. Feel free to present at any time now. They'll be going over some of our new features within line balancing.
Right, thanks, Paige. So yeah, what we're going to do now is basically walk through our line balancing module and the features and some of the new features that we've added. Along with me, we have our developer Arul, who's going to be talking about those new features. So right off the start, what I want to get into is what line balancing is in Proplanner and what the basic philosophy is. And then I'll hand it over to Arul to talk about the new features. So for those who have used Proplanner or are looking to use Proplanner, just a basic introduction of what line balancing is. For those who have used the system probably know this, but I'll just walk through it quickly. As you know, our software is oriented around the process, the manufacturing process. And key to that process is what we call an activity. Activity is, the smallest amount of work that I would move between operators, right? Anything lower than an activity would be like a time study element. So it's the smallest amount of work that I would move between operators. And what we do after creating the activity in Proplanner is we map multiple data elements to it, right? We, as Lindsay was saying earlier, we do time studies, be it MODAPs, calculated or observed time studies are just your best guess. We allow you to have a time element tied to the activity. We map parts to the activity so that we know what's happening, as was being discussed in the 3D discussion earlier. From the parts, we know what models the activity is being called for. We map tools, we map ergonomic decisions or movements on the activity. We can create control plans and FMEAs from the activity. And finally, we create work instructions out of that activity. So the activity is heavily loaded in Proplanner. It's key to our process plan in general. And one of the reasons that it's so useful to do line balancing or moving activities between operators is because we move all of that information with the activity. So as you reassign work between stations and operators, all of that information moves with it, right? So as you can see here in the line balancing chart, we take these activities, we align them by station, by operator, and then the line balancing has allows you to manually move work or has algorithms built in that move the work for you automatically. And that's the basic philosophy behind line balancing. You can see down below, we are showing that as you move this information around, we are able to create all this rolled up data for you, be it routings, BOM, costing, work instructions, control plans, a set of consumed parts, and so on, right? So that's the basic idea behind line balancing is, we're moving activities and we are creating all this information for it. Right? So line balancing, the UI, if you can go, the user interface in Proplanner, it shows a bar graph at the top that shows for each station or operator the work content. It's fairly easy to use. You can drag and drop activities between stations. You can also use our automated algorithms that move the activities for you. We show you violations if you move activities around, be it violations in the sequence of or the order in which you're doing the activities, what we call the precedence violation, be it a violation of tools that are missing at the station where you move the activity to, or zones, zones meaning the area, there's a missing area in the station that you cannot perform the activity at. So all of those are features that are built into the tool. We show you that as the activities move around. You can create a view for just a standard stacked bar graph showing you the activities and the total time at the station. What Arul is showing here is a view of the MUDA at a station. So the red, green, and yellow show you the non-value added, value added, and semi-value added content at a station. And then most importantly, the line balancing supports mixed model line balancing. So we allow the user to create a line balance for multiple models or mixed models. And then at each station, we are able to compute the average work being performed across all those models that are going down the line. And some depending on the rules of the company, some folks go with the average being less than takt time. Others have a representative model that they want to keep below takt time and so on. But all of those capabilities of a mixed model line balancing are available in the tool. I think that's where the benefits are. This is the same view that Arul was showing earlier, but now instead of a simple rolled up bar graph, we are showing you a stacked bar graph. At each station, this is the work by model. So the blue is one model and that pink is another model. And then the dotted bar is the average at each station. And then the other thing that you can do here is for each of those tiles that you see in the Yamazumi graph that we're showing here, you're able to click through each of the tiles and get details about all of the content of that activity. So what I was showing you earlier, you can look at what models is this activity for, what options, what's the time, what steps are involved in this activity, what tools does this activity need, what parts, and so on, and even watch a video or look at images tied to that activity. This is a great tool for the shop floor users. If you have a group of users who contribute from the shop floor, who contribute to your line balance, who are involved in moving activities around, this Yamazumi view is very popular in those settings. I think a lot of companies do these with a board with magnets on it where they move these bars around. It's exactly trying to mimic that functionality, but it's a lot more informative, because each of these tiles has all this information behind it that the user can simply click on and review the details for. So before you move your work, you can get the full analysis of what's happening. You have your tack drawn right there. It will show you the impact of moving that around. It'll push your average up and down. And then also, and as I was mentioning earlier, you can switch this just simple stacked view to a Muda view to see what happens if I move work around. Does my non-value added content at a station go up or down, and so on. So, very easy way of interacting with the balance and moving things around. Finally, before I hand it over to Arul, just a little more about line balancing and the algorithms that I was talking about earlier. We have three major algorithms. Minimizing number of stations. So basically, you give it a tack time, and the system tries to compute the least number of stations required to do a balance. Minimizing cycle time, which is where you give us a number of stations, and the system tries to tell you the most optimal tack time that you should be running the line for. Last one is minimizing the number of operators, where you're not really moving work between stations because you have a constraint. You can't really add stations or remove stations. So your work at each of the stations is pretty much fixed. You are trying to have the system compute the number of operators and shared operators between stations for a given tack time. So those are three constraints, those three algorithms that we have built into the system. You can see we have multiple constraints also in the system. We respect if you group tasks together, if you have work zones that I was saying, I have a wall coming up on the line, so I cannot do any work on the left side of the line, or this is the only area where I can work under the vehicle. So those are what we call work zones. Monumental resources, hoists, things that flip the unit upside down, those are only fixed at certain points on the line. I cannot have that work move anywhere, so be respectful of that when moving activities, and so on, right? So these are constraints that we can add to the line balance to get a more accurate result before we move work around. And you can see that the tool tries to tell you of all the possible errors that can, not errors, I guess, violations that can come up as you try to rebalance the line for attack time. You might not have enough stations, you might not have enough operators, you might be violating monuments, you might be violating zones, and so on. All of that comes up as you try to run the balance. So it's very interactive. It lets you go back in and out of the balance as you tweak things around. One of the most important things in line balancing is precedence. That's essentially the order in which the activities occur on the line. As we went through this process with multiple customers, we realized that defining precedence is a challenge. If you have a small set of activities, maybe you can still manage to do the precedence and connect them all together and in the right order that they must occur. But if you have thousands of activities, maintaining that graph is a significant challenge. So we took that input from the customers and we added a feature called clustering in the software. And we'll get into that here and show you how that works. The other thing that we've added in line balancing is accounting for times that do not have any Muda classification. With a lot of these audits in the plants where folks are trying to eliminate non-value add, improve reduce non-value added costs on the line. We saw that there were a lot of activities that were missing MUDA classifications or had incomplete MUDA classifications. So, for example, if I had a 2-minute activity, only 1 minute was accounted for in MUDA. So we added a feature in line balancing to show that to the user. Not only am I showing you value add, non-value add, semi-value add, and idle time, which are all critical for MUDA analysis, I'm also showing you that, hey, you are missing a lot of the time. You haven't accounted for a lot of the time under MUDA, and so your losses are higher or lower because you still don't know the true picture here. So with that, I'll ask Errol to go in and show those two features, clusters and tracking unclassified time. And then at the end, we can go into some more line balancing discussions and questions. So,
right. Thanks, Abhishek. And yeah, as Abhishek said, precedence is one of our non-optional and key constraints that we take into consideration when creating a line balancing scenario. So this line balancing scenario that I've created from a routing that has precedence defined. So let's take a look at that routing first. So the first thing you want to do when you want to define precedence is navigate to your routing and then navigate to your precedence tab. So there are two main ways of defining precedence. One is in the sheet view and one is in the graph view. And many of you who are familiar with using Microsoft Project for defining precedence earlier would remember how this works, but the idea is same. You just define your predecessors and the successors are automatically calculated here, but you just give your predecessor row IDs and define your precedence that way. And the second way is to do it in a graph where you have all your activities as nodes in the graph, and then you just link task from task to a different task. So in this example, there are around 20 activities that I've defined, and defining precedence for this is simple. But however, in a realistic routing, that what we have seen from some of our customers is that this could range anywhere from 500 to, and in some cases, like thousands of activities. And defining precedence for each of these activities, to and from each of these activities, is going to be a difficult task. So the new feature addresses that, and also also in some cases we may not know the entire sequence. Let's say this, you may know that the first 5 activities these 5 activities come before the next 5 activities, but you may not necessarily know the sequence within those 5 activities, 5 or so activities. So that's where the new feature clusters will come in handy. So there are 3 main ways of defining cluster. So let me just wipe out my precedence that I've created. So the first way of defining clusters is by just typing a cluster ID. Just gonna say, and good feature that we have is this is exactly like Excel. You can just drag, drop, and copy the values onto an Excel. So that's the first and simplest way of defining clusters. And the next is to just select a bunch of activities and right click and say add to cluster. And here you'll be presented with a new UI where you can put those activities into an existing cluster if you have one, like how I created one right now, or you can create a new cluster for them. I'm going to say door. And you can add more activities to this if you decide to, and that's where we have added this UI. And if you are familiar with using advanced search, this is exactly the same UI, where the routing and routing type now is fixed. You can search, you can add activities from different routings, but you can filter the activities within this routing. So once you have results, you can select your bunch of activities from this advanced filter form and then add those selection. And you can also select and remove some of the activities that you decide. But for now, I'm just going to add these to the second cluster. And now this is a new view that we have added as part of the clusters feature. And this is also a way of creating new clusters. So this will list all the clusters that you have created, as well as it will also let you create new clusters in this UI. And it not just that, it will also give other key cluster related parameters in this view. You can put a cluster description, sequence number, and sequence number will be taken into account when you're doing default precedence in the graphical view. And also you can have clusters inside clusters, which I'll explain in a moment, and also link clusters to different activities or different clusters. And one another feature that we have added is like how we have color coding for the graphical activity nodes. We have also added color coding for the cluster nodes. So I'm just going to create a new cluster here. I'm going to name it I'm going to hit save. So now this cluster does not have any activities yet. So you can just select an edit cluster and you will be presented with the same form that we used in the first sheet view. And then similar to that, you can just add activities from here. All right, now the last is the graph view. So now here in the graph view, you can also create new clusters by just selecting the task nodes that you want to create a cluster for, and then right click and say add to cluster. So I'm gonna name this, what did I name? And I'm gonna say final assembly 2. All right, so now we have 4 clusters. Now, if you do want to see the activity nodes within each cluster, you can select that cluster you want to look at and then say expand cluster. You can also expand and collapse all the clusters at the same time if you want. And that's again will bring you this cluster crowded view, which is not very helpful. So there might be cases where you just want to group all these activities into a cluster and just focus on one at a time. So that's where you should be able to select the cluster there. All right, I'm just going to collapse all clusters. And the next big feature that we have is dragging and dropping. So once you have defined clusters, you can just drag drop activities from inside and outside clusters. And to define precedence, you can just define a link, precedence link, like how you define between activities. You can define it from cluster to activity node, and also from activities within that cluster. So that's pretty much the ways in which you can define precedence and how clusters will help you with doing with creating the precedence. And one more thing is like when you move the activities from inside and outside cluster in the precedence view, as well as in line balancing and Yamasumi chart, like Dave and Abhishek pointed out, uh, like uh, when you're moving them, you're moving everything that relates to activity along with it, like the model mappings, option mappings, work steps, resources, and consumption and videos if you have any. So that's one of the biggest advantages of using Proplanner as assembly planner, where even if you move your activities uh, across stations, across clusters, or across um, stations, you don't lose your data. And once you have made all your precedence related changes, you can go back to the line balancing scenario using line balancing scenarios tab. And you can just open the scenario, just view the Yamasumi chart, or run some reports from here. And this brings to the next new feature that Abhishek pointed out. So we have added the ability to show unclassified MUDA times. So previously we had a VA, NVA, SVA, and idle and setup times, but we have added unclassified time as its own category. So what we have observed from our clients is that not all of them define MUDA categories for the entire portion of the task time. So and they would in most cases would want to view them as its own category. So now in the line balancing chart, as well as in the Yamazumi view, you would now see a new category for those unclassified times. That was fast. That was an overview of some of the new features and enhancements. If you want me to dive in deeper into any of the particular features that I've discussed, or if you have any questions in general about line balancing, you can let me know.
Thanks, Arul. It doesn't look like we have any hands raised right now. Does anyone have any questions? Or if you do, please just do the hand raise and we'll get to you. All right, Dave, you should be able to go ahead.
Yes, so Arul, I was wondering if you or Bano could just show a few things related to the Yamazumi view. I know that we have, as you can see on the interface, we have the different chart types and different color coding types. So it might be good just to kind of provide an example. I know there's a lot of questions about filtering and whether I'm showing the color coding and whether it's model average or not. Maybe you could just give us a quick overview of some of those options, because some of those have changed this past year.
Right. Yeah, so the one of the features that Dave just pointed out is both in the Yamazumi as well as a line balancing chart. You can see all the models at the simultaneously at the same time. And also with regards to color coding, you can see I have selected here the NBA MUDA classification summary, but you can choose to not have any color coding, any specific color coding, and because I had selected two models, that's a default color coding that you're going to see. Or you can choose different color coding based on the classification, task sorted classifications, and also time sorted classifications. And also you have work zones, like if you have multiple work zones within a station, then those color coding will be different for that cases. Other than that, yeah, so you can filter or view multiple models at the same time and multiple options at the same time. Right now, this example doesn't do a good job in showing that, but yeah, so these are the ways in which you can change it in the Yamazumi view, as well as when you come to the actual line balancing chart view, you can change, by default, you're going to see all your stations, but you can switch to operators view. So like in this case, I have 2 operators per station, and now I have 6 bars, and you can move activities from across from across these categories. You can change the chart view type as well as the sheet view type. So to do that, you just have to select a station or operator in the sheet view, and then you choose your station that you want to focus at. You can also double click on the bar that you're looking at to go to that particular station's tasks. And as you all know, like to change an assignment, you can just drag and drop your activities into a different station, and you would be presented with this view where it would specify you which station you're moving the tasks to, what task you have selected, and what are the constraints you may or may not be violating. Did that cover the question, Dave?
Yeah, if you could go back to the view that you were just on, I think it might be a good idea that the conflict view where you drag a station, a task from one station to another, and you get the potential conflicts of that. I think that this is something that we've added. I can't remember if it was 2020 or maybe even a year or two before that, but it's been enhanced where given the fact that there are so many possible constraints, especially as we add additional ones over time, there's a lot to be considered before you commit to a change. So I think it's important to note that this is for people that are new to line balancing, this is a way for the operator, the engineer, to essentially see, hey, if I make this change, here are the potential problems it can cause. And we never want to restrict an engineer from making a change, even if it violates some rules, but we want to at least inform them, the impact of that change. I think the other thing to note too, if you could go back to the Amazumi view where you were looking at the ability to filter by model. Okay, if you just pull that down. So one of the things that we're seeing people do, a lot of questions, especially in automotive, has been when I'm doing my line balance, I want to look at my worst case model and I want to look at my best case, easiest model. Worst case being largest work content, easiest being smallest work content. But I also want to look at a representative model. And so I think what's important in line balancing for people to understand is that those models we're bringing in, those can be generated obviously in our order file, which is really before line balancing, where you can create actual customer orders. So you could generate a model with a set of options representing a customer order, representing the most complicated possible order, the easiest possible order, and the average most likely order. And by importing just those three models into this line balancing mode, we'll be able to generate all three of those possible scenarios: worst case, easiest case, and expected case side by side. So for those companies where the engineers are trying to figure out, you know, how is this station going to be impacted when we see our most complex model, how's the station going to be, how much extra time is that operator going to have with the easiest model? And over time, what is the most expected model? Obviously, as you mentioned, Arul, the software is computing what we would call a probabilistic average model. That's those shaded bar always in the line balancing view. But a probabilistic average model, you know, is obviously generated based on some sort of a percentage of model mix that we're expecting on any given production schedule. That's what we're seeing in this shaded bar there on the right. But once again, that may or may not really be representative, because of course, what's probabilistically going to happen is based upon a particular week, not a particular design concept, as in this is the worst case product, this is the easiest product. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that some of that filtering that we see now at the top in the Amazumi chart view, some of those filtering options have been changed in the last, let's say, 12 to 24 months in terms of what you can do. And we're probably looking at additional capabilities there as we bring in the capability for people to, once again, quickly look at from a design perspective on this assembly line, how flexible is this line at accommodating this kind of product mix? All right, well, if there aren't any additional questions, I know we're getting close to our next presentation. So thanks a lot, Arul and Bondo, on the line balancing details.
Yep, thank you guys. For our next session, which is our last session of this morning, Bondo will be going over Proplanner's and-on fact board.
All right, thanks Paige for that. And thanks, Arul. So I will get into the and-on fact board that we have in our system. I'll first start by sharing my screen. Okay, so with the MES features being heavily added into the application, one of the requests that had come out of that implementation of MES was, why not let us do and-on calls from the line, right? And that's the reason we added this feature into our shop floor viewer. This request did come from one of our customers. So what I'll walk through now is basically how this was implemented and do a quick presentation of how that looks like on the from a shop floor viewer standpoint. So the first thing I want to talk about is Proplanner shop floor execution solutions. As some of you may be aware, we have multiple execution level solutions being offered by Proplanner, right from configured work instructions to tracking the unit, collecting data from the unit, to publishing torque settings to the unit, doing PFE e-kitting in Kanban, having repair flows tied to the unit. with all of those capabilities, we've now also added the and-on, issuing and-on calls to the line using our shop floor viewer, right? So that's that was a natural progression from having each operator on the line access to our work instruction viewer, our shop floor viewer. So the thought was that, with that level of access, why not use that application to also generate and-on calls on the line? So that's basically the history behind why this came to be. For those who are not familiar with the overall shop floor rollout or execution piece of Proplanner, just a quick summary of how that works. Proplanner sits in between product design and execution typically. So product design means EBOMs, ECOs. You've gone through the presentations this morning. That's what we were trying to say, that we receive EBOMs and bill of materials from external systems. We use those bills of material, and we create a process in Proplanner. That process consumes parts. That process has model option mapping, time studies, line balancing, just like we were talking about in the previous line balancing discussion. So that configured bill of material that arrives from the engineering system is consumed. The process for that configured bill of material is created, and that leads to us creating a configured process, which has all of that information tied to it, right from parts to tools and so on. And that configured process is now sent downstream to the shop floor for displaying work instructions, for collecting data on the unit, for any kind of shop floor level integration like and-on, for controlling the torque tools, and for creating Kanban and kitting calls on the line. So that's the basic setup of Proplanner and why this is a part of Proplanner. So I would just start with and-on. For those who are not familiar with and-on, so and-on is basically a system on the floor that lets the operators pause production or raise an issue tied to a production. And typically, it's for a critical issue or line down kind of a situation. So basically, you're raising a flag, you're causing an alert that to catch attention of others on the line, be it the line lead, the supervisors, or the engineers, and have them come in and review the issue on the line. You also want to document that issue. You want to go to the root cause behind that issue and do further analysis with it. So basically, that requirement of having to raise an issue is what drove us to use the shop floor viewer and the accessibility that the operators have to the shop floor viewer, to be the system that allows them to raise that issue. So major components of an and-on system are creating the alert or the raising the issue, notifying and displaying the issue so that everyone's aware of it, closing the issue once it's resolved, and then to document it and have to do future analysis with it as to why we are having these issues on the line. So those were the components given to us from the customer who wanted this implemented. So with that in mind, we said, okay, this fits really well with our shop floor viewer. So for those who are familiar with the shop floor viewer, it's basically our web-based work instruction display application. It started as a work instruction display application and has since matured to showing the work instruction, collecting data about the unit that the operator is working on, collecting critical information about parts, about tools, about steps that they're performing, tracking how long it's taking each operator to perform their work, and so on, right? So that accessibility to the shop floor viewer is where we decided to add this, the and-on feature. So, we are not calling it and-on per se, but we are calling it hot issues. So a critical issue on the line. We are allowing the operator on the line to file this as they're looking through the work instructions. So I think one of the features that was important as to why this should be from the shop floor viewer was, an and-on in general is someone operating or pulling a cord to turn on a light or creating an alert that way. And so you can see here from the customer, that was just to raise an alert, but tracking it down to which unit I was working on, which activity in that unit caused this issue, which part was I consuming, what tool was I using, which step was I on, right? All of those lower level details that are critical in future analysis of figuring out why we had to stop the line or raise this high level of urgency is valuable, right? That's what you want to go back and see. Am I having an issue with the process that was being performed? Am I having an issue with the part in general? Should I go back to my fab team or the supplier that's sending that part to see what's going on? Am I having an issue with the resource or the fixture, the tool that I'm using? Is that where the problem lies? So I think rather than just raising a flag and turning on a light and having someone document this externally, on a pad or some other, system like that, tying it to the system that generates the work instruction, that generates the actual work content for the operator, and knowing that this is where the issues are coming from. That to me, that to them was the most valuable piece. So you can see here they said, earlier with the light tower, there was a process of informing others and tracking them down and so on. Now it's all integrated into the same system that I'm viewing my work instructions on. So as far as implementing this to the line, the key applications on the Proplanner side that are necessary, obviously the assembly planner, that's our main process planning database. This is where you create your line, your stations, your operators, and your activities for each operator. You would need the shop floor viewer. This is kind of the controller that the operator has to raise the issue while viewing the work instructions. And the third application is the fact board. So fact board is our and-on dashboard, and that's where we we visually show the issue at the station, and we also have a fact board view for the line leads or the supervisors, so they can look at the entire line and see which stations are calling out which issues, right? So those are three key applications or three applications that would be necessary for us to use the and-on system. From an implementation standpoint, this is at the customer where we implemented the solution. You can see that they have multiple monitors at each station. They have a monitor at each station. That monitor by default is showing the status of the station. So basically a green bar in this particular station. These are all station ones and 3 operators working in that station. But the green bar indicates that everyone's okay, everyone's working without any issues. And similarly, if this was turned on at each station, you would be able to from a distance see that monitor and or that display and gauge whether there are any issues on the line or not. If this was moved to a supervisor view, rather than just seeing station 1, you would possibly see all the stations on the line in one configured view. And the bar at the top will not only the bar at the top will change colors to show you what's going on. There will be a band around each station that is having the problem, so it's very clear to the supervisor or the line lead as to which station is having the problem. And I'll get into that a little bit as I show the application. So the process is fairly straightforward. The operator is signed on to shop floor viewer, looking at work instructions for a particular unit, or and going through their steps that they need to follow. Once they see an issue at the station, they basically create what we call a hot issue. They fill in some details about the hot issue that they're seeing a problem with, and then they file it. And as they file it, then and on board that I was showing you earlier has a big red bar on it. Now it shows there's a problem at this station. It has a bar around the operator that filed the issue, so you know which particular person to go to. In case you're looking at a line with a station with multiple operators, so you can walk up to that person and see what's going on. And not only that, it's a two-way communication. So once someone files an issue from the shop floor viewer, all of the details that are captured by the shop floor viewer are shown on the dashboard. If one were to click on that little icon that shows that there's an issue, and you can see the details filed by the operator, so you know what's going on. even if you're at the end of the line or sitting in your line lead area where you're just monitoring the stations. So it's a very interactive tool. It lets the operator file the issue. It lets the line lead and the supervisor look at all the details. And so this was another reason why there was a lot of benefits seen by the customer. We are now allowing you to categorize the issue. So it's a smarter way of filing a problem on the line rather than just saying, missing part or missing tool. You can go down and say, I'm having an issue with, and categorize your different problems. You can say quality problem, logistics problem, engineering problem, and so on. You can even categorize the severity that it's gonna stop the line or it's gonna stop me alone. So you can differentiate between those steps. And if you're signed into a unit, it's automatically tracking the serial number or the unit that you're working on and associating the issue to it, right? So it knows that this issue came from this unit, which was this configuration, these options and so on. So you have that association back to what type of units are causing this, making this issue come up. So, getting the categories of why this is happening and getting down to that level of detail, I think gives a lot of clarity to the engineers as to why, these problems are happening. Once you see that issue, so this is on the line leads view, you can click on that, you can get all the details tagged to the unit, and you can either address it by, closing it yourself and addressing it and closing the issue, or you can have someone go down to the line and close the issue once the solution is in place. So that's really the process of filing the issue, closing the issue, and all of the steps in between that are required to track the issue. You can see another thing that we are doing is we are tracking the actual downtime itself, which is also a lot of value. If I have a problem on the line and my line went down for so many minutes, or my particular operator wasn't able to operate for so many minutes, we are tracking that. We're putting it in a bucket of its own so that you can see the total amount of time the unit spent at a station and how much of that time was value added or actual work being done versus how much of the time was downtime. So you can differentiate between the two and get to more root cause analysis. So, the data that is being captured is again of a lot of value here. You can, as I said, you can differentiate between the type of issues. You can set the severity. You can put details about the issue itself. You can track the downtime, and so from the customer, as you see, being able to go back and analyze that data and look at patterns and so on in that data, so that you can go back and resolve, take bigger action in resolving that issue, is another key element to this and on board. So with that being the case, I would like to jump into the application. So again, for those who are familiar with the shop floor viewer, all I'm showing you here is our test environment. I have a set of units that I'm working on. As I sign into a unit, the application is going to take me into that particular unit, show me the work instructions tied to that unit. So this is me, the operator on the line, coming in, picking up my tablet and signing on to a unit that I need to work on. And so typically the unit is in front of me. I'm either selecting from a list here, or I'm scanning the serial number of the unit that's in front of me, and I'm shown my set of instructions for that. Right? Again, it's a test environment, so it's not a lot of data, but I just wanted to show the workflow here. So I select my station and my serial number, and I then select my activity that I need to work on. It immediately asks me that I want to sign on to the activity. I do. And now I'm shown work instructions that I need to perform while I'm working on this unit. So I'm at the station, I'm working on that model, that particular serial number, and these are the steps that I'm supposed to perform. Now, at the same time, I have a display on my line or at my station, right? So if I'm just operator one, right? So let me just go back and show you where I signed in. So I signed into station PPS1 and now I'm operator 0, right? Now, if I look at my dashboard, I have a view just for that. So if I'm looking at, if I'm at the station, that's all I'm seeing, right? That's all the view that's on top of my workstation because I'm the only operator working there. And as I was showing you in my email earlier from the client, there'll be one such board at each station showing the status of that station. So that's my hand-on view for that station. If I'm the supervisor, as I showed you earlier, I probably want to look at all my operators at all my stations, right? So I'm seeing that kind of view that shows all the stations in one view so that I can figure out which station's having the problem. So those are the two. I mean, the configuration is up to you as to what makes sense to see. Some folks may be responsible for just a couple of stations. Some folks may be responsible for the entire line. So you can choose the stations you want to see. Now I'm going through my work instructions and I see a problem and I can file an issue right here, right? I can, I can say there's a quality issue. I can say that this is a critical item. I can put a comment about it, missing part 1. So I can type in all this detail, and say, okay, I'm filing my on call right now, right? So I do this. As soon as I do it, it says there's an active hot issue going on at your station. And it prevents me from working further because I filed a critical issue. And by doing that, if you see right as I do that, my fact board also changes. We now have a big red bar in my view. It's showing me exactly which operator on the line is facing the issue. It puts a blinking cycle time on it to know that my work has stopped because I'm not able to continue. And if I'm the line lead sitting at my own station or my office, I can click on this and I can look at the issue that was filed. It's telling me it's a quality issue, was filed on this particular unit. These are the details that the operator filed. And just to be clear, these issues, again, going back to the customer that we're working with, can be codes, QR codes that if I have a simple scan, I can just scan and have a predefined text come in here so that I can categorize my issue easily that way. If you're not going to click through the options, but this works fine for them. It's few selections. They've selected, they file in some details, and now this is being tracked. My supervisor is able to see what issues going on, and at this point, if the supervisor says, "I know what to do this," make some calls, get someone out there with the correct set of parts. I can just close this issue, and as I close this issue, it goes back. My fact code goes back to normal. And if I were to refresh this page, let me just close here. If I were to refresh that page, it would take it away from my screen as well and start my clock back again for me to continue working on that unit. So that's the basic interaction between the operator signed into a unit and the fact board. Causes the alert, stops my work, puts in a display of what issue was reported, and lets everyone look at it. The other place that I can find an issue is if I'm on the line and I see there's a problem with the work being performed, I can just file a hot issue right here. Okay, and it's basically me saying that there's a problem on the line, and I can just click through and I can fill out those details, and I can create that issue also. So two different avenues. I can go through the unit and have the operator file it, but if I see other issues on the line that I need to stop the line or stop work on the line, I can fill out those details and file the issue as well. At any point in time, if I have a lot of open issues on that particular station, I'll be able to see it, whether I'm whichever view I'm in, whether I'm in the shop floor view or I'm on the dashboard. So if anyone wants to analyze what's going on, they can look at it, they can see when it was open and which of those have still not been closed and take appropriate action that way. So that is it from a presentation standpoint. I will leave it up to questions from anyone.
You do have one question from JC in the chat. He asked, Are these hot issues filed by category for review so it can easily be reviewed to find common issues?
Absolutely, yes. So all of that data that's being captured while the issue is being filed or after the issue is closed, etc., is all dumped into our shop floor database. So we can extract the entire transactions that the operator did on the line, dump it out to as a data set for you to do analysis on, or you can create those reports. We can create custom reports that dump out certain parts of that data. But at the end of the day, we are tracking when the operator sent into a unit, when the first downtime issue occurred, when it was resolved, and when the operator finally signed off the unit. So every break or every issue that is filed in between is tracked in its own bucket, and the entire time that the operator spends with the unit is available for you to analyze, broken down by actual work being performed versus any kind of downtime that took place. So I think our experience is best to just extract that data and give it to the customer so that you can do your own charting and analysis with it. If there are some pieces that you would like to track and have as standard reports, we can discuss with everyone and see if we can do that. But at the end of the day, that data is all available for you to do analysis on.
Okay, and you have one other question. Someone had asked, is fact board available now?
Yes, fact board is available as a solution, as an offering from Proplanner now, yes. So the three solutions that I said, and they are all available, are assembly plan and shop floor viewer, which is authoring and viewing, and Factboard is kind of a reporting solution that we originally had intended it for, but that's where Andon fits in best, because it's not sitting on top of these solutions, it's reporting the data out, and in this case, it just happens to be an Andon call. Yeah.
Okay, and it looks like we have another question from Dave. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to mention a couple of things about Andon as well. Andon actually operates from a separate server. That server can be located, in an environment that would allow for access anywhere in the world. I mean, it's using the internet. It could be just intranet, it could just be inside your firewall, or it could be external. But I also wanted to mention that the Andon views that Vando was showing, are totally a thin client view. So cell phones, tablets, computer screen, it could be in your factory, it could be in your line, it could be on a TV screen mounted in the factory, or you could, as you see here, or it could actually be a manager in another building in another state watching the status of a line and reacting, or somebody in COVID working from home trying to address line issues and watch and monitor the line from their living room. So the Andon system, the Andon server, is basically this view on a total web browser that allows you to alert what's going on. I also wanted to mention about the Factboard Andon system is that these alerts that Vando mentioned are coming from shop floor viewer to the Andon display. Those alerts are essentially kind of like a web service transaction. What that means is that you can have other devices, other software applications besides Proplanner's shop floor viewer generate alerts to Factboard. Okay, so let's say you have a machine that's controlled by a custom software program, maybe something you even wrote, and if that machine goes down, you want an alert sent to the Andon display. Now that machine isn't using shop floor viewer. There may not even be a person at the machine. It's a completely automated, auto-generated alert to Andon. It could be a PLC, it could be a DC torque tool, it could be a truck driver using another software application, driving down the road with a Wi-Fi access that had an accident, and you want to throw an alert to the Andon display about an issue. So the Andon system, Factboard, as we call it at Proplanner, is a separate server, a separate software application that's essentially receiving what we call JSON calls. JavaScript object notation is what it stands for, but it's essentially a text file that's generated by a software application running on any device anywhere in the world, can send this alert to Factboard. So what Bondo was showing was obviously where the alerts are coming from Proplanner's shop floor viewer, and he's showing you how we see the status of those resources, those operators, those stations, but they could be any resource in your organization, and the alerts could come from any device, software program, or tool in your organization. So the opportunities for Proplanners and on board to be, if you will, more, be bigger, if you will, have a broader footprint of alerting you to problems in your organization is much bigger than just the final assembly line as we often see it from Proplanner's perspective. That's all I had. So, thanks, Bondo.
Great. If there aren't any other questions, this is the end of our morning session. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. For those that did register for the afternoon session, as a reminder, that is in a separate email link. It's a separate Zoom. So you will need to grab that link from your email there to join us at 1 p.m. But for those of you who didn't register for the afternoon session but may be interested, I sent the link in our chat, so you can copy and paste that in and register there if you'd like. Otherwise, we will see everyone at 1 o'clock for a few more guest speakers. Thanks, everyone.